Now, the next one I'm going to test as a complex is homocysteine formula. Now, homocysteine formula, as we'll see a little later on, is related to B6 and to vitamin C. This is how we get rid of homocysteine. And if we want to recycle homocysteine, we need B12 and we need folic acids. And most importantly, as we'll see later on, is choline. And probably that is the predominant pathway. So let's have a look here. Push down. Now, John strengthens the homocysteine formula. Okay. So what does that tell us? He's probably got high homocysteine, hasn't he? Okay. Good. Okay. So now let's see, is that the only thing that he needs? Okay. So how would I test whether he needs something else? So back to the eye position. He's in strength because he's got the homocysteine on him. Okay, so it come up on the, yeah, on the screen there. Okay, so I'm taking him into the eye position for the nutrients, push, and he's strong. So he's saying, I don't need anything else. Okay, so we've done his cranium, we've done his homocysteine. So let's have some homocysteine formula. Can I have some homocysteine formula? And the next thing is obviously we'll work out the dose, isn't it? Okay, so the beauty of the homocysteine formula, and we'll cover that in detail just a little later on, is to metabolize homocysteine. In other words, to get rid of it, that enzyme, that CB synthase enzyme, to make it into cysteine, to convert homocysteine into cysteine, is B6 and vitamin C dependent. And the whole thing has to be conjugated with the amino acid serine. So serine is an amino acid, and amino acids are present in animal and plant foods. The more complex, complete ones are in animal food. But there's one substance which is particularly rich in serine, and that is beetroot. Okay, so we put the vitamins in the base of beetroot because it's a natural organic substance which is rich in serine. So he has a lovely tummy button there. So we're going to put one capsule in there. Obviously we take off the homocysteine formula. So the first thing is now is we've found out what he needs. The second thing is the dose, isn't it? With all forms of medicine, whether it's natural medicine or you've always got to, or allopathic, you've got to find out the dose. So he needs 3 capsules, strengthen him. All right? Now, next question is, we've done what he needs, we've done the dose, what's the next thing? Is how often? Yeah, well done. Okay, so next point is we cross-therapy localized to the stomach meridian, because that's breakfast time, isn't it? And he strengthens the stomach. Next one is we go to small intestine, which is lunchtime. Not quite, but it'll be 1 o'clock till 3 o'clock. What's the answer there? No, he doesn't like that, okay? And then dinner in the evening, circulation sex time, 7 till 9. Push down, John. No. So when does he take it? For breakfast. Simple as that, okay? Now what I'm going to do is tell you exactly what is in there. All right, and this is really important. Can you hear me? Because what I tend to do is to speak up, and then I come out of the treatment room, and the receptionist always says, "Why are you shouting, Chris?" Because you get, in fact, they can hear very nicely, even though they've got the headphones on. So he needs 3 homocysteine formula, and I'm going to teach you about why this is different, because it's got the vitamin B6 in the pyridoxal 5-phosphate form. But most importantly, it's got vitamin C in there in the complex form, the organic form, which includes the enzyme tyrosinase and the bioflavonoids, and the alpha-lipoic, which recycles vitamin C. So he won't need so much vitamin C if he can keep recycling it. Okay, now, do we leave him now and say, bye-bye, see you in a month's time? And we could do that. Can you still hear your heart? This has gone to sleep. Yeah, okay. So he's still listening, busy listening to his heart. We're pretty happy here. Push down. That everything's working all right with his left brain now. What?
You just turned the heart off.
I've turned it off?
Yeah, it was playing.
Let me go. Is it back on now?
Yes.
Should be, okay. He probably had nearly a heart attack there because the heart stopped. But what he forgets, he's so into this, he forgets this is what he was 10 minutes ago. Okay? This is not what he is now. People think they get so used to hearing it, they think it's their own heart, and they're hearing it at this stage. Because remember, it's looping, and sometimes as the front to the beginning to the end of the recording links, you get a little bleep. Okay, you can't always guarantee you're going to have a perfect join. So they, oh, I've got a misbeat there, but it's not a misbeat. You warn them that you might just get a bleep. But his brain recognises that. It recognises everything to do with his heart. So with John, he's nice and strong. Okay, now, do we leave him at this? You know, when we do the left brain, if we fix someone's left brain, what must we do then? We must have a look at the right brain, mustn't we? Okay, so now let's have a look at his right subscapularis. I'm sorry, I'm in your vision a little bit there. Okay, push down to the floor. Oh dear. Push down to the floor. So he's conked out on the right side. So what we'll do, John, is from a simplistic point of view, let's take you round the other way. Or in fact, before I do that, let me just demonstrate the homocysteine. So, have you guys got a homocysteine formula up there? If you remember with homocysteine, homocysteine is something which we can load by the challenge. We need the actual marker. Yes, the test file. Okay. Now, homocysteine is made from the amino acid methionine en route to making cysteine. And what we find is the best thing to test is the pure homocysteine, or even better, which brings up about 27% more, is to load that homocysteine with methionine, so it really picks it out, so it pushes that pathway a little bit more. So is that the marker? Yeah, well, anything. There should be a methionine-loaded homocysteine.
Oh, yeah.
But we're testing with both. So going back, he's got nothing on him at all, right? No headphones, because if we're going to test homocysteine, we're testing it from strength to see if it weakens. Right? Remember, it was the left subscapularis which weakened to it. Okay? Now, we take obviously off the homocysteine formula there. Put that away. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop homocysteine. That's the real McCoy, the so-called nasty, all right? But of course it's not nasty at all, is it? God didn't give you homocysteine for no reason. It's a damn good thing for blue people. Why? Because it's recycled to make more SAM. If you didn't have homocysteine, you'd probably die of a methylation defect. Okay? It's the finest methylator or remethylator, and to remethylate you need the B12s and the folate, okay, and the choline, all right? But for a red person, they don't want homocysteine because it weakens the collagen tissue in the body. They want to get rid of the homocysteine into making cysteine. So what we're going to do here is we're going to test him with homocysteine, which is nice and strong. Why is he nice and strong to it? Because I'm testing the left leg, which is the right brain. His problem's in the left brain, isn't it? Okay? So he's told us that. Okay? So he's homocysteine. If I didn't test both sides, I would have missed that. He is a homocysteine person. What does this tell you with his body type? He's a red. Okay, let's see whether that's the case. John told me, he said, I'm a red through and through. I don't believe him. He was a red. He's too tall for a red, isn't he? He's well spotted. You know, he's an Irish red. Okay, so let's have a look what he is. Okay, or what he should be. This is why he's stuck with problems, is because he's become a red. Okay? His biological type is not a red. Can you see long, thin fingers? No. He's green. How tall are you in inches, in feet and inches?
6.5 inches.
6.5 inches. 6.5.
Yeah,
6 foot and a half inch. 1.5.
Yes.
Yes, well, that's tall, isn't it? That's certainly a grain. Okay, no problem. Okay, so he's showing up to red across both eyes. Pull. You've turned into what I was like for 15 years. I was a red as well. Convinced I was red. He's red. Okay. Shall we try the other colours? Can you get me green and blue out there? So let's try green. So on his body type, you know, with his height and things, we would say that he should really be green. So why would he have changed? What could change his body type, you know, that he's manifesting as a red, which unfortunately is giving him all the bad aspects of a red. If I was to test you with wheat now, he'd probably weaken to wheat. He would certainly weaken to homocysteine, he'd probably weaken to ApoE4. So, now, let's test him. So it's the emotion, isn't it? The subconscious emotion. So we test the right amygdala, or greater wing of the sphenoid, to the left. All right? So remember, we're comparing the right to the left. Okay? Now, we'll do it around the other way. We'll compare the left to the right. And there we are. So it's his left brain is in conflict with his right. His left is the logical, his right is the intuitive one. They're having a fight. One part of him is saying, I want to do this, and his left side is saying, oh, no, you can't. And they're just... Okay, could we have a torch? Have we got a torch? Oh, there's one here. Okay, so how do we treat this? You can treat it in whatever way you like, with light therapy, etc., etc., etc. But I'm just going to do the fast one with the mirror on light straight into the umbilicus. Why the umbilicus? Because the umbilicus is where chi, or life energy, goes into the body, not only when you're a fetus, but all your life. Okay, so it's called the Shrine of God in Chinese medicine. And you can put light therapy into there. You can put it in the eyes in many ways, but it's a beautiful place to put it in. And what happens here is it creates harmony in the system, because you're looking at the extremes of the rainbow with the ultraviolet and the infrared, which is what the violet flame is all about. And people see this light when they meditate. And when they meditate and they get to that point of complete relaxation, they see the light, because the right and the left hemispheres are in harmony. And most people can only do that if you shut out all information coming in. So they try and silence the brain, then you're in harmony. But very seldom, when the brains are ticking, are they in harmony, because they're doing, you know, they're seeing things from different aspects. So if you can switch off your subconscious, that mind, not the active controlling mind, the conscious mind, but the unconscious or the subconscious mind, that's the one you've got to switch off. And that's what people who are enlightened say. They say there's no chatter. They switched off their subconscious mind. All they hear is themselves and their conscious mind and their thought process, which is lovely. So this is what people see when they're relaxed. And so what we find after a minute of that is he will be in harmony, in other words, his left and his right brain. And what the incredible thing is, as a side effect, which is what we were after, is he should have lost his red bit and gone back to what he should be. All right? So if we go back to red, because John was showing red, red, and he's now strong. It's like a trick, this, isn't it? Okay, so, okay, now he's green, which is what he should be, because that's his height and his nature. He should live on his adrenals. You know, when you're red, you live on your thyroid, and you know you burn, 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 and so he's a green. Okay. Now, if we come back, you see, he'll actually change his whole constitution as a result of that. So he'll become much more of a green person than he was of a red person, which is good in a sense. But bad news now is cheese. He may have a problem with cheese. He may have a problem with nickel, okay, because of being a green, okay. So there could be some bad sides, you know, to this. And solanines, of course, isn't it? Greens are no good with solanines. So solanines are well known to inhibit what? They inhibit the parasympathetic nervous system, acetylcholine. And acetylcholine is really important because acetylcholine runs the parasympathetic nervous system, including the vagus. Okay, so that's probably enough. After lunch, and we haven't finished for lunch yet, but after lunch, we'll come back to you, John, again, and we'll do the other side. Okay, so we've left him one-sided at this stage because we found out what it is that he needs, but we haven't found out what the other side is going to tell us. Now, if you remember, when we've done this with the right-left brain, the first brain that shows up, in other words, the first side which weakens, whether that's right or left, is the one that has the upfront symptoms for the patient. That's what they've come in complaining about. Okay, so he's complaining about whatever he's complaining about. Okay, but the second side is the one, the second brain is the one where the problem is. Okay, that's the cause. So one is more the effect and one's the cause. And this is probably reflected in the heart as well, as you'd expect. So what we find is that the first side, which is on this side with him, is the effect. So the effect is that he needs some extra B6, extra vitamin C, a little bit of some folate, a little bit of B12 and some choline and some beetroot. That's the result, okay? But what the hell is the cause? Okay? Why does he need that? Does he look as though he doesn't eat properly? He's a sensible guy. I've known John for many years, and he probably eats very well, I should think. Well, we'll say you do anyway. Okay. But why should he need so much, vitamin C? Do you ever eat fresh fruit? Mm-hmm. Yes. So should he be vitamin C deficient? Do you eat whole grains?
Not much.
Not much. Okay. What about brown rice?
Yes.
Yes, brown rice. Beetroot?
Juice.
Juice. Okay, so he shouldn't really be that deficient in all those nutrients, should he? But he is, because something is driving those down. I'm going to put my money on something perhaps toxic, or could be an infection, could be a creepy crawly in here. There could be all sorts of things, couldn't there? Okay, so we'll see how creepy crawlies and toxic metals particularly can affect the cardiac function. Okay, we've already seen how a cranial fault can affect it. By the time we build up, get a month's supply of the homocysteine formula into you, and you'll be in good shape. Okay, but every time we take him off the homocysteine formula, he'll start to show he needs it again, because something is creating that situation. So we've given him we've fixed up one heart-brain relationship without fixing the other one up. So we need to do that this afternoon. Okay? You can go down there. All right, so let me whip forward now back to where we were. So we've got 5 minutes before lunch. So what we looked at first of all was the diminished first sound. If you remember, meant that it was lower than what it was optimal. Now we look at an accentuated first sound. That means it's bigger than normal. So here we've got the normal on the top with this particular slide, and here we've got the accentuated first sound. All right, so that's on your laminate there, or your chart. So this may be due to a hyperthyroid, especially with an exophthalmic goiter. Okay, when you get a goiter, an exophthalmic goiter, what does exophthalmic mean? When you've got staring eyes, you get a pad of fat behind your eyes, and people really stick out like that. Okay, and they get a goiter. So this is a hyperthyroid situation. Okay, now hyperthyroid will speed things up, and it'll make the metabolism very fast. All right. So it may create a tachycardia, it may increase the first sound, it may increase the second, or all of them. Okay, you could have tachycardia and increase both sounds. So thyroid. So now, just now with the lowered sound, we looked at testosterone. Okay, so we brought in the gonadal hormones there. Now we're beginning to look with first sounds and things at thyroids. Okay, an increase in the first sound at the mitral valve area of moderately increased duration followed by an accentuated aortic sound indicates left ventricular hypertrophy. In other words, the heart itself in there is getting too big, and that if you hear it at the actual mitral valve itself. High in the apex area, that's the lower part, the apex is the bottom there, it often occurs during infections. So when people got an infection, it's not the bug, heaven help, you've got a bug actually in your heart, but it's the toxins, it's the endotoxins that the bacteria and the bugs produce, which affect the heart firing and the power of the. So you get an increase, and you know that when you're ill, you can hear your heart thumping away there, and it is thumping away there. Okay? So what is the cause of hyperthyroid? In other words, an overactive thyroid. Is it because someone's taking too much iodine in their diet, etc., etc.? The general feeling now, when I ask this question with colleagues, in the medical profession, they say, well, we don't know. It's an autoimmune problem, it's Hashimoto's, and they're going to burn themselves out. But there are people who have high thyroid rates. And the general feeling is that, remember with thyroids, we're looking at the red body type governed by the thyroid, is that it's an allergy or an intolerance to wheat or stroke gluten. Okay? So think back to basic principles of body types, red body type, thyroid, what are they sensitive to? Wheat. You can't go too far wrong if you go back to these basic principles to find out what could be triggering an immunoglobulin IgG, IgM reaction, which not only fights the proteins perhaps on the wheat, but tackles the thyroid. Okay? So this is what causes the hypothyroid. So most people in our field say, oh, you know, go for the wheat or allergy as the cause of an overactive thyroid. I learned years ago that certain metals have an affinity to the thyroid, and they can increase it and they can decrease its function. And so always look for toxic metals. But with John, toxins didn't show up in that left eye position. They didn't show up. Why? Because we've only checked one heart, one side, okay? So remember, the second side is going to be probably more where the toxins and the cause is. So we wouldn't be at all surprised if something like wheat or toxic metals, iodine excess, and to calm an overactive thyroid down, they need vitamin C. Now that's something I learned, but again, it's the vitamin C complex that they need, not just ascorbic acid. Ascorbic acid is purely the antioxidant part to protect the vitamin C complex, which the main part of the vitamin C complex is an organic copper-dependent enzyme called tyrosinase. Okay, so that's how we might think. So think vitamin C complex, look at if they're taking too much iodine, and definitely go for looking at allergy and toxic metals. Okay? Could be other possibilities, but this is what we'll see with the high first sound. So if we look at next one, will be a diminished second sound. Okay, now the diminished second sound means this one here is small. Okay, see that one in relationship to that one. Remember, this is the aortic and the pulmonary valves. So what happens is the shutting of those valves depends upon the pressure in the aorta and the pulmonary artery. So once the blood has been pumped out by the ventricles into the main arteries, those valves have to shut, otherwise all the blood will rush back. It has to go in the direction down the circulation, not back into the heart. Okay, I think we're all in agreement on that, otherwise you get what's called regurgitation, which of course is one of the problems that we get with the valve. So a decrease means there's not very much pressure in there. Okay, so if we get low blood pressure in there, okay, in other words, we're not pumping out enough blood in there to cause a good hard snap in the second sound, that's classical of what? You know, all the books tell you, and you've all studied this, and you've never done any attention to it at all. It's hypoadrenia. Okay, it's a low adrenal function, isn't it? When you get low blood pressure, is an indication of hypoadrenia. And that's what Dr. Goodhart and Dr. Smith wrote about in all their books, and they ask us in our diplomat exams, you know, about this lowered second sound. And we sort of say, well, oh yeah, you write it in and you say the answer is an indication of adrenal problems, okay? But we never knew what a phonocardiograph was. It was a machine from the past somewhere. So diminished second sound, maybe due to hypoadrenia. It's an indication often of low blood pressure in the pulmonary artery and the aorta. Now, peripheral blood pressure is different. Peripheral, you're measuring in the brachial artery. That may be normal, but you can have low blood pressure centrally. So they're now looking at much more of how to measure central blood pressure as opposed to peripheral. So they may miss blood pressure problems. You can have hypertension or hypotension. And really the decreased second sound is an indication of hypotension in the central areas of the aorta and the pulmonary air. So myocardial degeneration. So this could be that we're beginning to degenerate within the muscle tissue of the heart. Dilatation of the left ventricle when over the aortic area, and failure of the right ventricle when over the pulmonary area. So we're obviously beginning to get a decreased ability of the valve to work effectively. But the most important thing is this low blood pressure and hypoadrenia. So what would we do? We do the usual things as we do with our, to build our adrenals up. We look at the vitamins, and in this case, we look at the alcohol-insoluble vitamins, the vitamin Gs. So here we need the B2. This is all in your notes, by the way, so don't worry about writing it all down. We need the B2, the B3, okay? And in this case, it's interesting because it's a nicotinic acid that works, and that's the one that gives you the flush, okay? Now, so you don't have too much of it. You do what Ms. Muscle does. If you have excess, you get a lovely flush, and then you can experience a menopausal symptom, okay? Okay, so it's now, it's B6, and the B6 is in the form of pyridoxal 5-phosphate, okay? And folic acid, okay? Now, folic acid is in the form of folic acid plus zinc, okay? So folic acid on its own is an inert vitamin. It has no function in the body. It has to be activated to methylene or methylyl or methyl tetrahydrofolates, and to do that it needs zinc. So a combination of folic acid and zinc allows the body to convert it into any of the active forms. Okay, so that's why that's in them. Now, these people need, as we'll see, to recycle homocysteine, okay, and other factors, and so they need choline. Now, choline is a so-called non-essential vitamin B, which in fact is very essential, but it's non-essential because we make it for bacterial fermentation in the gut, and we get it from certain foods. And choline has a number of functions. Main one is making phosphatidylcholine, which is one of the predominant phospholipids, but the other one is to recycle homocysteine through the liver. And it's a lipotrophic factor. Lipotrophic means it breaks fats down. Okay? So this is the good for the red person because they tend to have high cholesterol and high triglycerides, which is why they tend to show that the vitamin G factors are much better for them. They need breaking the fats down, and they need vasodilation, okay, to get the heart to get the circulation round. Okay, so along with G there we have inositol and biotin, again for those same reasons there. So G is the alcohol insoluble forms, and what you've got there is you've got your B2, your riboflavin, you've got your B3 in niacinamide, you've got your B6 as pyridoxal phosphate, you've got your folates, the active form of folates, and you've got your choline and your inositol and biotin. Good all-round selection for that person. Vitamin C. The adrenals use more vitamin C, apart from the eye, of anywhere in the body. So vitamin C, the richest source of vitamin C in the body is the eye. Why? Because that's what it obviously needs, a lot of vitamin C in the eye. Okay? So eating the eye is a very important part of nutrition, eating the organs of an animal. Okay, now the second highest is the adrenals. So when you go and you slaughter your animal, the prize bits are the eye and the adrenals. And the third part, which contains the vitamin C, is what? Is the gonads. Okay? So all those organs are the select bits of the meats, really, that people don't eat anymore, which they should do, particularly if they're to get all these minerals and things in them. Okay, so vitamin C. Essential fatty acids we give again to get the adrenals to work better, and calcium lactate. Now calcium lactate, as I say, calcium gets into the cell, into the muscle, and helps it to contract. Okay? Now the best form of calcium is always the most ionizable form, in other words the most liquid form. If it's insoluble, okay, it won't get into the cell, it won't get across your gut. So if you take calcium carbonate and you put say 500 milligrams of calcium carbonate in there and stir it, right, and then leave it over lunchtime, you will have approximately 500 milligrams in the bottom of the glass. Okay? So if you swirl that around and swallow it, how much of that do you think you absorb? Virtually nothing. Okay? So what do they sell as the source of calcium in pharmacies and things? Calcium carbonate. Well, you might as well just drink some tap water down here, because you'll get more calcium probably in there. So you've got to make that ionizable. Okay? Now nature's way of doing you calcium, guess where you got calcium from as a baby? From the mother's milk, of course, yeah. You drained the mother of her bones and her teeth and everything else. She gave you the best in the milk. And so calcium lactate is the most ionizable form. Now, some people don't like the idea of lactate, particularly blue people, because of lactic and cow milk and things like that. But this is synthetic. It's not actually from cows. So this is perfectly tolerable calcium lactate for blue people. But a lot of companies have gone over to other ionizable forms like citrates. Citrates, malates, and these are very soluble. You put them into water and they're almost 100% soluble, which is great. The trouble with citrates and malates is they're present in the Krebs cycle, and if you give one, you might block the other one. Okay, if you give citrate, you might block the malate, and if you give the malate, it might block the citrate, and so on. So sometimes citrate will show, sometimes malate, sometimes citrate malate will show, and sometimes none of them. Okay, so we find the calcium sulfate chloride with a bit of citric acid is a very good solid ionizable form. But if you don't want the liquids, then generally a calcium, such as calcium lactate, is a very good, it's the best for it. Now we're working at the moment on a good smart calcium, because I think the smart ones have nature's products in them as well. And Jill after lunch is going to tell you a little story about why we add the foods or the natural substances to the compounds to get them to work better in the body. Okay, so calcium lactate, the finest source of calcium, is milk. There's no question about that. You know, nobody's going to argue about that, whether it's human milk or animal milk. And if you concentrate that as a yogurt, it's even more. So yogurt is overwhelmingly the best source of calcium. But of something which you can encapsulate and take, the finest source of calcium, which doesn't degrade, is actually sesame seeds. But of course, if you put sesame seeds in a capsule with calcium, they're going to go rancid. Okay, so you're going to have old oils there, oxidized oils. That's not going to do you any good at all. Okay, so the finest source of platinum is arrowroot. Arrowroot, and they feed this to babies. Arrowroot as a source of calcium. It's fully ionizable. When it goes into water, it's fully ionizable. So as a source of calcium, arrowroot with calcium lactate or with calcium sulfate, etc., is very good. What you don't want to give is calcium phosphate or any of those calcium. A lot of them are totally insoluble. You know, you put phosphate in and they'll stay at the bottom like a carbonate. So there's no point in taking those, because the more something is soluble in solution, the better it's absorbed, obviously. If it's insoluble in a glass, it's going to be virtually insoluble in you. Okay, so that's essential to get that second sound up, is an indication of low adrenal function. You need to get the calcium into the tissue so the muscle can contract in the first place, right? And that needs your essential fatty acids. So you have to test which is the essential fatty acid or the essential fatty acid group that the person needs, right? So you will need to know how to do that. And Jill will be talking about that later. So after, when I come back on, after lunch, we'll be looking at the accentuated second sound, in other words, the bigger one, and the fast heart rates, the tachycardia and the bradycardias. Okay? And then we'll be moving into the functional valve problems, okay, as far as opening and shutting valves, of problems with stenosis and problems with regurgitation. Okay? These we'll listen to a few recordings there, and you'll pick these up very nicely. And then the last part of it is the neurological problems, which is the firing sequence. Okay, when we get an irregular heartbeats, which is what you pick up very quickly with your stethoscope. But we also want to do some practical. So during the lunch, we'll get the stethoscopes out, Bob, if that's all right. So we did find that in the update, some of you are not familiar with stethoscopes, are not familiar with taking blood pressures and things. So one of the ways of breaking into this is we'll get each other to test your blood pressure, test your pulse rate. These are sort of standard functional tests. And then we'll go for the heart itself, and we'll go for testing the subscapularis muscles.